So Mayor-elect Eric Adams, he has named the new NYPD commissioner. This is a Black woman. This is the first woman to be an NYPD commissioner. This is the first Black woman to be an NYPD commissioner. This is historic. This is a big deal. So I'm very happy to see that Mayor-elect Eric Adams did this. And I hope I'm saying her name right, Keechant Sewell. Hope I'm saying the name right. But I got to tell you, Amisha, I have some serious concerns. You know, I wasn't a big supporter of Mayor-elect Eric Adams. I interviewed pretty much all the candidates except for him. And I am deeply concerned and terrified over reinstating stop and frisk and over reinstating the police plainclothes unit, which was disbanded because it was only increasing crime and increasing violence. It was disbanded because it was so terrible. So Mayor-elect Adams says it was done the wrong way. Now, I don't know how something that was disbanded, because there were so many civilian complaints and there was fatal shootings by police. It was terrible. And then, of course, stop and frisk was deemed unconstitutional by the New York State Supreme Court. But he is hell-bent on bringing this back. And although crime is on the rise in New York, I can recall interviewing Maya Wiley and Diane Morales, and they were saying that the solution to fixing crime is not going back to what we did 20 years ago or 10 years ago or 5 years ago. It's thinking of a new way to handle crime, transformation in handling crime. So as somebody who was stopped incessantly during the stop and frisk years in New York, and Rep. Jamal Bowman talked about it as well too, I'm really concerned because I want crime to go down, but I don't want to see Black and brown men and women in New York to have their lives less safe, even with police. So the new police commissioner, she was asked about this at a press conference yesterday, Keechant Sewell, again, the new NYPD commissioner, who is a Black woman, and about stop and frisk and reinstating the police plainclothes unit. Listen to this.
I understand the concerns as it relates to stop and frisk, but I will tell you that anti-crime and plainclothes units work. They have to work with the community. You need the right people with the right training to do the right job. And I'm ready for that. I'm ready to take a look at what's already being done to get it right.
That's just categorically not true. It does. I'm looking at an article from the New York Times right here. It says the plainclothes units were part of an outdated policing model that too often seemed to pit officers against the communities they served, and they were involved in a disproportionate number of civilian complaints and fatal shootings by police. That's just not true. Why Mayor-elect Adams? Why this making history as this new NYPD commissioner? Am I wrong? It concerns me. There's so much crime in New York City. I don't want to give the NYPD more power, more excuses to harm Black and brown people, as we also don't want to have crime and violence in our own communities from people who are criminals. Amisha, your thoughts?
I think that you're right. And here we know that politics comes in windows, and so does policy. And what Eric Adams saw was an opportunity. He's someone who comes from a law enforcement background. He's someone who saw that crime was ranked as one of the top policy issues for New York, as well as the majority of big cities across this country. And he took a moment to lean on something that we know statistically, scientifically, socioeconomically, in every way of progress has been proven to be false. There is no central standing or ground to even have stop and frisk anymore, to have, honestly, foot chases, or to have a lot of these old tactics that have been proven over the past few decades to not only be functionally inaccurate in terms of how many people, actual criminals they catch, but also the fact that they're extremely predatory. because they happen in Black and brown communities and they're not happening in white communities. They aren't
Right.
reducing any level of crime. What they are doing is causing major friction and distrust amongst the community and the police, but they are also raising the alarm and, quite frankly, in many cases, brutalizing innocent citizens, particularly young men of color. And there is no real standing for it. But what happens is interest in it comes in waves, and some Black people actually supported this as well. And I say that because we saw in the late 80s, early 90s, this real push to ensure that our streets were safe. And what that meant was more cops with more brutal practices. And that is what a lot of people actually supported, because they didn't want to see drugs on the street. They didn't want to see people dying. They didn't want to have their handbags stolen. They didn't want carjackings. Fast forward 20, 30 years later, you have this huge criminal justice reform swath that is out here protesting in the streets saying, hey, all of our men are locked up. Many of our men are locked up who had absolutely nothing to do with crime in our communities. Our men do not trust the police because they had their heads bashed in as 15 and 16-year-olds walking with their backpacks to school. So I think that with this comes a great deal of angst, but it also comes with a great deal of opportunity. If you're an elected official, and we've seen this from various Democrats, Eric Adams being the most successful, in the sense that they take advantage of the emotions of their voters. When people see carjackings go up, when people see violent crime go up, they want to see a police solution. What they are not looking towards is the solutions that we all know work, making sure that economic development is available in the community, making sure that our education systems are equitable, making sure that there's equitable housing, that people have a place to lay their heads at night, ensuring that we have job skills training and supports, that we have a living wage for individuals. There's so many things that come together to make safe communities, none of which are sticking police in these communities who are going to violate your civil rights, brutalize you, in some cases murder you, and also lock up people who never committed a crime to begin with. I think that we have to get back to all of the things that we argued about during this criminal justice reform renaissance around what actually does alleviate crime in our communities. And it has never been chokeholds. It has never been stop and frisk. It has never been plainclothes officers. Those things don't work.
Yeah, well said, Amisha. And it's I'm looking at the article right here. I don't want y'all to think Amisha and I are just it's not even speaking from our heart. It's facts. It says that the police, the plainclothes units, it was a vestige of stop and frisk, where officers routinely search people in quote unquote high crime areas, a practice that a judge declared unconstitutional after finding it disproportionately affected people of color. Now, when a judge, a New York State judge, outside of New York City, this is a very conservative state, when a New York State judge is saying something is unconstitutional and disproportionately affects people of color, God damn. I think Mayor-elect Eric Adams is smart enough to think of an innovative way to handle crime, to think of a smarter way, a transformative way of how we can handle crime in our communities. I really believe he has that ability. He's worked with police. He has worked to reform police. I believe he has that ability. We don't need to go to old tactics. And it really concerns me. And I'm going to tell you something else, Amisha. I've said it before. I'll say it again. We're going down that 1994 crime reform bill lane.
Absolutely.
For all the people who complain about that crime reform bill, I was in Philly. I was 15, 16 at the time. I remember people on the street protesting, demanding more police, demanding more law enforcement. And we got it with those heinous laws. And Joe Biden co-wrote that crime reform bill. Y'all keep on demanding this, they're going to remix us to death.
In windows, and when people are, and it concedes to demand, when people are demanding to have changes in their streets, and the only way that they have co-signed it can happen is through police, and in many cases excessive force and brutality by those police, violations of civil rights, then that's exactly what you get. And it's not just in New York. In Chicago, Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx is going to have an uphill battle in her next election, because quite frankly, Black folks on the South and the West sides are out here saying, lock up all the young people. We don't want to have carjackings in our communities. We're tired of things getting stolen. Violence has gone up, and there's a frustration among them that does not actually look towards the types of solutions that would make more equitable and safe communities and an economic environment that would lower drastically the rates of violence that we see. They immediately want police solutions. And I think part of that is because we've been so ingrained by white supremacy to believe that these solutions will actually fix our communities.
Okay,
Even
Bell.
though it's been proven time after time, they don't.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I just want us to think critically. And if they reinstate stop and frisk and the plainclothes unit and it's successful and it's amazing, I'll be the first one to say I'm wrong. But I don't want to see the civil rights of Black and brown people violated. There has to be a different way. You can't go back to the old tactics. There has to be a different way. We're going to Giuliani and Bloomberg tactics. Really, Mayor-elect Eric Adams? Come on, brother. That's
just because there's a black face pushing it doesn't make the tactic any different when there were white people in front of it.
Yeah, it's just, and listen, the other thing that nobody talks about, they say crime, right, Amisha? But the biggest thing is gun violence. It's gun violence. So you mentioned Chicago. What's happening is they are selling guns via straw gun purchases across state lines, selling them to criminals. What we really need is a federal strict gun laws so folks can't buy guns in a neighboring state and sell it to criminals. Because now these AR-15s are everywhere. We need a really crackdown on our gun policies. But that ain't going to happen. If you have
gun policies that exist outside of AR-15s as well, and I say that because we also have to raise the alarm that the majority of gun crimes in America aren't committed by AR-15s; they're committed by handguns. With that being said, we need to have a better tracking policy for these guns. We need to know who the owners are. That is impossible to do with straw sales because you can sell it to anybody on the street. But we have to make sure that states are not working independently. That's where that federal legislation is so important, because it doesn't make sense for Illinois to have the strongest gun laws in the nation. However, Indiana, Wisconsin, Michigan, all of its surrounding states are loosey-goosey with theirs, and anybody can sell guns across state lines at any given point. And the influence in terms of the targeting that we've seen on the streets of Chicago are very real, not only for the numbers, but also for the levels of violence that people feel that are on a daily basis. This is not episodic. And I think that it doesn't bother me that there are so many Black people who want to see change. What bothers me is the change that they're asking for is very similar to the change that they begged and pleaded for in the 80s and 90s. And that's how we got the crime bill. Ask for it again and push hard enough. Electeds want to get reelected. At the end of the day, they're going to give you what you want. And that's not going to be what you want long term. You really want more Black people locked up in extremely long and egregious sentencing, who honestly, in most cases, their communities are brutalized, things are falling apart, and this isn't helping. We saw it before. We don't need to see it again.
And folks have said to me, well, what is your solution? My answer to that is that's not my job. It's the job of Mayor-elect Eric Adams to think of innovative. I like Maya Wiley and Diane Morales, their ideas, but he's elected, so it's his job to think of innovative solutions. But he says go back to stop and frisk. Okay, it is what it is. So congrats on the new Black woman NYPD commissioner, but I do have to push back. Stop and frisk does not work. Plainclothes units, they do not work. New York State Supreme Court judge is saying that. Like, we got to operate in facts. I want to remind people of a man named Sean Bell. Remember Sean Bell? He was shot and killed by the NYPD in 2006. A total of 50 rounds were fired by the NYPD, by both plainclothes police and undercover police.
And at times they did it wrong, Clay, like busting down doors, shooting people, just being hella wrong when they're on these chases and trying to catch a criminal, and a Breonna Taylor dies, or a Anna Jet Young in Chicago is standing, changing her clothes to get ready for her job, and is standing in the room naked in front of 6 different officers when they bust into the wrong home. So no, I don't think that these things are helpful. I think that we need to envision law enforcement. We need to envision how we create crime prevention strategies in a different way, because the policing entities we currently have and how they are structured do not allow for crime reduction at all.
And witnesses, the police said when they shot and killed Sean Bell, again, 50 shots, they said they identified themselves, just like they did with Breonna Taylor. But witnesses said they never identified themselves. They were plainclothes police officers. They never identified themselves as they approached them with their weapons and just began. Imagine plainclothes people approaching you with weapons. I mean, in New York City, in Queens, New York. Imagine that. That's just one example. And of course, for those folks who forget, Sean Bell was killed the morning before his wedding. So I just want things to be fair. That's it. That's all I want. And I think it's possible. New ideas. And, you know, Camden, New Jersey has done some amazing work with how they've reinvented police. Amazing. Camden is not the safest place, at least when I was growing up, next to Philly. They've done some amazing work on the way they've reinvented police. So that's what you call just strategy and thinking of things the right way. Let's do one more call if we can before we head to a break. Rudolph from Jersey, first time caller. What's up, Rudolph?
Hello. I
Hey.
grew up in Harlem, New York, and my experience has been this when it comes to the police, that they aren't a part of the community, and they don't view the community as being brown and black people as just being humans, unfortunately. And I don't think any type of sensitivity training is going to teach them otherwise. They have to actually learn and understand the police they're policing and respect the people that they're policing and want to be a positive part of those communities. And that no amount of training can teach that. You have to make it mandatory that these people become members of the communities that they police and respect the people that they're policing and look at them as being peers instead of things.
Well said. I also want to remind people that Amadou Diallo, he was killed back in 1999. He was fatally shot by 4 NYPD plainclothes police officers. I'm just saying, just want to remind, there's a little bit of history there. Plainclothes police officers. He was shot and killed, gunned down. Because again, what do you do when you see 4 white men coming at you with a gun? I'm not going to think police officers. And if I think, that might scare me even more. And he was standing near his building, if I remember correctly, returning from dinner or something. And they shot him dead because they were looking for an alleged rapist. And they just thought the African guy was that guy. Plainclothes police officers. I'm sorry. I think every police officer should have a uniform on. That's just me. JUSTFORME. Just for me. That's just what I think. What do I know?